Hey mathematics learners, welcome to Distance Learning with Lee, where I make learning mathematics super easy. On today's video tutorial, we will be analyzing a quotation that has been given to a client named CJ Tanner by a company called JR and Sons Painters, right? The take from this video tutorial, guys, is us, right, being able to analyze a quotation and also understand basically the terms and conditions of a quotation, right? We'll also be doing a few calculations in this quotation. We'll be calculating the 50% deposit that the client that needs to pay upfront, right? We're going to be calculating the subtotal. We're going to be calculating the discount of 5% that the client gets. We're going to be calculating the amount excluding VAT, right? And we're also going to be calculating the VAT amount of 14%. And we're also going to be calculating the total amount that the client will basically have to pay, including the VAT, right? So that is what we're going to be looking at today, right? So before we get started with the video tutorial, guys, please make sure that you have subscribed to the channel. Please make sure that you've clicked on that notification bell so that you get notified every single time I upload a video tutorial, guys. And also don't forget to give this video tutorial a huge thumbs up, because that really helps the channel grow and it helps the channel reach more learners that want to better their mathematics marks, right? So without any further ado, guys, let's get started with today's video tutorial. So before we even get started, right, with this video tutorial, guys, it's important that we understand what a quotation is. And a quotation is a detailed written account of the costing and conditions for the work or the service to be performed, right? And it's also important that once the price and the terms and the conditions of the quotation have been laid out, right? And once they've been accepted by the client, then the client is bound by the quote as well as the service provider. So when would we or people request or when will we see a quotation, right? So for example, when you want to probably make a house renovation, so when your parents make house renovations, right, and they basically request a quotation from a building contractor, right, that quotation that building contractor will give to your parents, or that you will get, right, will basically show how much, right, the contractor will charge you for labor. The quotation will show you how much the contractor will charge you for material. It'll show you how much the contractor will charge you probably to demolish demolish your property. It'll also have a description of how long it will take for the project to be completed and things like that, right? So it basically has a detailed written account of the costing and conditions for the work or the service to be performed, right? Okay, so that's just one example of when one can see a quotation, right? And let's look at the example that is basically given to us here, right? So let's have a look at this quotation, right? So like we mentioned, this quotation was basically given out by JR and Sons Painters to a client called CJ Tanner, right? The client, let's just assume this client is a lady, right? So Miss CJ Tanner stays at 29 Anderson Street, Bergville, right? And the date in which this quotation was issued out was the 2nd of February 2021, right? What is this quotation for? This quotation is basically to refurbish a kitchen, right? So Miss CJ Tanner basically wants to renovate her kitchen so that it looks popping, right? Okay, we're given the telephone numbers of the JR and Sons Painters Company. It's 021-783-1178. And then we're also given the company's VAT registration number, right? Remember from the video that we did on till slips, when a company has a VAT registration company, right, that basically tells us that JR and Sons Painters is a company that is registered with SARS as being compliant with SA tax laws, right? So that is what we know, right? So we also given the job description, right, of what the JR and Sons Paint is going to do to basically refurbish Miss CJ's Tanner's kitchen, right? So this is what they're going to do. So they said that they're going to strip and vanish the window frame, and that is going to cost 500 Rand. They're going to prepare the wall surfaces and repair all cracks. That is going to cost 600 Rand. They're going to paint the walls, right? 1 undercoat and 2 coats DV, and that is going to cost 400 Rand. They're going to remove the window blind and replace with new blind, owner supplied. That is 150, right? And they're going to vanish paint and other materials. It's going to cost 650. So we're given the job description, or what the JR and Sons, or the labor that they're going to do, as well as the materials that they're going to use. And you're also given the price of that labor, as well as the price of those materials that they're going to use, right? We also given information here. They said that work will take 2 days. So it'll take JR and Sons Painters 2 days to complete the job. And they also say that they need a 50% deposit payable upfront. So before they can even start with the job, Miss CJ Tanner needs to basically pay 50% deposit upfront, and then another 50% needs to be paid after the job has been completed, right? So they also tell us that this quotation is valid for 14 days, right? For 14 days, this quotation is still going to be 500 to strip and vanish the windows, 600 to prepare the wall surfaces, 400 to paint the walls, 150 to remove the window. It's going to stay like that for 14 days, right? Meaning that after 14 days, this quotation might probably increase and it won't decrease. Chances of it decreasing very slim, but it will probably increase, right? So Miss CJ Tanner basically now has to sign this quotation, and once they sign this quotation, that means that now they are bound to the quote, right? And they're obviously required to make the payments as stipulated by the quotation, right? We're also going to be calculating the subtotal, the discount at 50%, the amount excluding VAT, the VAT at 14%, and the total including the VAT, right? So that is basically what we're going to be doing. We've analyzed this quote, and now we are ready to get started. But before we get started, guys, please just take a quick screenshot of this quotation, right? As well as the questions, okay? And once you have done that, okay, please try and attempt these questions on your own, right? And once you've attempted them on your own, then you are ready to play this video tutorial and obviously follow with me. That is the most effective way that you are going to learn, okay? So now we are ready to get started, okay? So it says study the quotation and use it to answer the questions that follow, right? Question number 1, who is the client and what is the quotation for, right? So I don't have to go back, but I'll go back, right? So the client is a Miss. We said we're going to assume that it's Miss, right? But it's SJ Tanner. So that is the client, right? And what is the quotation for? The quotation is to refurbish the kitchen. All right. So the client is CJ Tanner and the quotation is for refurbishing the kitchen. Refurbish basically means renovating the kitchen, right? Let's go to the next question, okay? On what date will this quotation expire, right? So when you go back to our quotation, we remember that they said that, right? This quotation is only valid for 14 days, okay? The quotation is only valid for 14 days. So if it's only valid for 14 days, what does this mean, right? So if the quotation was written on the 2nd of February and they tell us that it's valid for 14 days, right? Count from the day in which the quotation was given 14 days, right? So the 2nd of February, we count the 2nd of February, the days included. So 2nd, 3rd is the 2nd day, 4th, 5th, right? Count up to 14 days, right? And the 14th day is on the 16th of February, right? And that is when the quotation is basically, that's the last day in which the quotation will be valid, right? So on the 17th of February, the quotation, that this quotation won't be valid, right? So the quotation is valid from the day in which it is issued out. We need to count 14 days, including the day in which it was given, right? So from the 2nd, we count the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, all the way up until 14 days, okay? And the 14th day is on the 16th of February. So this quotation is valid until the 16th of February. Okay, so this quotation is valid until the 16th of February 2011, or the quotation will expire on the 16th of February 2011, right? Next question. Why is an expiry date necessary, guys, right? I'm sure as we've looked at our quotation, we noticed that there was an expiry date there, right, that was given to us, right? Why is this expiry date necessary? Why is it necessary? The expiry date, guys, is very important because price of goods, right, they may change. Okay, the price of goods may change. You'll find that a tin of paint today is 150 Rand, right? And maybe after a month, it is 160 Rand, right? So to protect the service provider, okay, there needs to be an expiry date. Okay, because let's say, for example, the service provider didn't include an expiry date, right? And the client decides to obviously make use of their services probably after 3 months, right? And after 3 months, then the price of materials has basically increased, right? So what will now happen? The service provider will basically work at a loss. They won't make a profit, right? So therefore, to protect themselves, the service providers need to include an expiry date, right? So that is exactly what we're going to write. Okay, next question. Use the information in the quotation to find answers for A to E, right? So let's start off by basically calculating A, right? So how do we basically calculate the subtotal, right? So the subtotal is basically us just taking all of the prices and just adding them up together, right? So if you just take 500 plus 600 plus 400 plus 150 plus 650, right, we are going to get what the subtotal is, right? So just adding all of these prices together will give us the subtotal, right? So if you punch 500 plus 600 plus 400 plus 150 plus 650 into your calculator, you'll find that your subtotal is equal to 2,300, right? So that is the subtotal before we've added the included VAT, right? Before I've done the discount of 5%, right? And so on, right? Okay, now let's go to B, right? So B basically wants us to get what? Okay, the discount at 5%, right? So CJ Tanner is given a discount of 5%, and we need to find out what that discount is, right? Okay, so we want to find out what 5% of 2,300 is, right? So we know if we see that of right there, that basically means we need to multiply, right? So what is 5% of 2,300? So what we do is we can just take that 5%. When we see that of, you multiply it by 2,300, right, to get what? The 5% discount, okay? And if you punch that into your calculator, you'll find that the client got a discount of 115 Rand, okay? Please note, you can also interchange this, right? So you can also write it as 2,300 multiplied by 5%. If you punch that into your calculator, you will still get 115. All right, so let us calculate C. Right, so C needs us to calculate the amount excluding VAT, right? So how do we get the amount, the total amount that the client basically has to pay excluding the VAT? So the VAT has not been included yet. So what do we need to do to get the amount excluding VAT, right? So here we said that the 5% discount is 115. So we put that there. We want to calculate the amount excluding VAT. So what do we need to do? You take that 2,300 and you minus the 115 Rand to get how much the client needs to pay before the VAT is included. So let's do that. 2,300 minus 115, right, to give us 2,185, right? So that is the amount that the customer needs to pay before the VAT has been included, right? Let's go on to D. So the amount excluding VAT is equal to 2,185, right? So D, what is the VAT at 14%, right? So to get the VAT at 14%, we basically want to find out what would 14% of 2,185 Rand be. Okay? Because you charged VAT on this amount here, right? So what would the 14% of 2,185 Rand be, right? So let us do that. So we want to find out what is going to be 14% of 2,185, right? Remember, I said when you see that off, it also means that you can just multiply, right? So if you take the 2,000, and I said you can interchange them, right? So if you take 2,185 and you multiply it by 14%, literally just punch that into your calculator. What do you get? You will get 305.90 cents, right? So that is the VAT. Okay, so that is the 14% VAT that CJ Tanner will basically have to pay. Okay, so let's fill that in. 305.90 cents. Okay, and lastly, what is the total amount that the client needs to pay, VAT included, right? Including VAT, right? So what is that amount? So what we need to do here, guys, we are going to take the 2,000, the amount excluding VAT of 2,185, and then we are going to add the VAT, right, of 305.90 cents to get what the total amount is, including the VAT, right? Okay, so this is E. Right, so to get the total amount, right, including VAT, what do? We take the amount that excluded the VAT of 2,185. You add the 14% VAT that we've just calculated of 305.90. And when you punch that into your calculator, you'll find that the total that the customer needs to pay, including the VAT, is 2,490.90 cents, right? All right. So we've calculated the subtotal. We have calculated the discounts at 5%. We've calculated the amount excluding the VAT, right? We calculated the VAT of 14%, which is 305.90 cents. And we've also calculated the amount that the client basically has to pay, including VAT of, and we found that to be 2,490.90 cents, right? All right, next question. Calculate the amount of money that must be paid up front, right? Remember when we went to our invoice, right, we were told that the customer needs to pay what? A 50% deposit that is payable up front, right? So CJ Tanner needs to pay 50% of 2,490.90 cents, right? Before they can start with the job, right? So let's just do that. CJ Tanner needs to pay 50% of, right, 2,490.90 cents, right? And I said that if you see that of there, right, you need to multiply the 50% with the 2,490.90 cents to get what the client needs to pay upfront, okay? So 50% multiplied by 2,490.90 cents. If you punch that into your calculator, you will get 1,245.45 cents. Please note that you can interchange these two numbers, right? You will still get the same value of 1,245.45 cents, okay? So that is basically how we calculate the 50% that the client needs to pay. All right, so it says that if the cost for varnish, paint, and other materials totaled 800 instead of that 650, who would be liable for this cost, right? So they're asking us, right, if in actual fact the cost for the varnish, the paint, and other materials actually costed 800 instead of that 650 that was written in the quotation, who would be liable for that additional cost? Would it be the client? Would it be the service provider? Who would be liable? All right. So remember what we said. Once the quotation has been signed by the client, right, then both the client and the service provider are bound by that quote. You cannot chop and change prices as you wish. If I signed that I'm going to pay 2,490.90 cents for this job, right? You're not going to now change and be like, oh, by the way, ma'am, the paint actually charged me 800 rand. That's not my problem. That's your problem as the service provider, right? Okay. So who would be liable for this extra cost? The service provider will be liable for that extra cost, because that means that you didn't do your research properly, you didn't check your prices properly, you didn't calculate how much profit you should make properly, right? So that is your problem, that is your loss, right? Not my problem, because I've already signed the contract and I'm bound to that contract, and you're also bound to that contract or that quotation. You can't chop and change it as you wish, right? So the service provider, okay, the service provider is liable for this extra cost because the client accepted the quotation as 650 for the varnish and the paint and the other materials, right? So the extra costs go to the service provider. It's not the client's problem that the service provider didn't calculate properly how much the material will cost them. All right, and that is it for today's video tutorial, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video tutorial. I hope it was super informative. We now know what a quotation is. We know what needs to be included in our quotation, right? Things like your expiry date or how long the quotation is going to be valid, that needs to be included in your quotation, right? It needs to be signed, right? It needs to have a list of obviously the job description as well as the price of the job description, as well as the materials that are going to be used, right? And we know that once that quotation has been signed, both the service provider and the client are bound by that quote, right? So you cannot chop and change as you wish. And I'll see you guys on my next video tutorial, guys. We are going through tariff systems. I know in the previous video tutorial I said taxation. No, I made a silly mistake there. We're going to be starting with tariff systems because that is what you guys are currently doing right now. So I'm going to go through tariff systems. So please make sure that you have obviously subscribed and clicked on that notification bell so that you do not miss the video tutorial when it drops, right? That is it, guys, and I'll see you guys on my next upload, Distance Learning with Lee, where I make learning mathematics super easy. Bye, guys.